and I am chairing in Mr. Ntantla Kumede's stead, who is the FTRM responsible for electricity regulation. I will be the chairperson of this public hearing, and I would like to introduce the other members of the panel. I'm still struggling here with my video, but I will try as soon as everything works. You will soon see the person that is on the other end of this mic. I would just like then to take this time then to introduce the other members of the panel, in the person of Advocate Nomalanga Stole, who's the Chief Executive Officer and the member of the Electricity Subcommittee. Advocate Stole, if she's still maybe ceased with the proceedings of the
just like then
service,
to take this time then to introduce the other members of the panel.
Mr. Tembani Pukula, who's recently appointed NERSA chairperson and a member of the Electricity Subcommittee. Mr. Pukula. If you can just raise your hand wherever you are, because I saw that you joined us. Let me then also proceed in light of the challenges that we're having today to Madam Precious Sibia, who's also recently appointed a part-time regulator member and the member of the Electricity Subcommittee. Madam Sibia, you may just switch on your camera. If you can just unmute yourself, that we can hear you.
Good afternoon, Chairperson. Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. Apologies if it's a bit dark. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Precious Sibia. As the chair has said, I'm the recently appointed part-time member of the regulator. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Madam Sibia. We'll then also want to apologize for Madam Maseti, who's the full-time regulator member for pipe gas regulation, and is also the a member of this electricity subcommittee. She still has a bereavement with the passing on of a sister. Having said that, I'd just like to proceed then to confirm that indeed the hearing was duly advertised in the following newspapers, the print media nationally, being the Business Day of the 11th and 12th September 2022, the BL of the 12th of September 2022, and the National Independent of 12th September 2022. It was also posted on our website, and it is held in accordance with the Energy Regulator Act, in which affected parties are given an opportunity to submit their views and present relevant facts and evidence to the energy regulator. This hearing is governed by the NERSA rules on public hearings, which can be summarized as follows. 1, all parties would be required to make their presentations under oath. 2, the presenters have been allocated 20 minutes each to make their presentations. Only members of the public, only members of the public may ask questions to the presenters. However, members of the public may forward their questions to Eliezer Dlamini, the Secretariat of the Electricity Subcommittee, at eliezer.dlamini@nersa.org.za. Mr. Dlamini will post his email on the chat, and the panel will then decide on how to deal with those questions. Fourth and lastly, should presenters wish to present information they consider confidential, the panel will make a ruling on whether to close the hearing or to have the information submitted in writing. The recording of this hearing will be done through our recording system and will be a live. There will also be a live streaming on NERSA's Twitter page, which is at NERSA_ZA. This will be the official record of this meeting. The House rules for this meeting are as follows. 1, please switch your cell phones to silent mode. 2, please ensure that your mic and video are switched off at all times unless you are making a presentation. Third and lastly, please use the chat responsibly to contribute to a meaningful discussion through the public hearing session. Just appeal to that we treat one another throughout this session with respect. We have the following 12 presenters for today's public hearing, and Eskom will be granted the 30 minutes as the applicant, with the others having 20 minutes. I would even appeal that we reduce these minutes as much as possible, noting that we've got a long list, and that we also observe that where there are repetitions of what has been echoed by a preceding speaker, that the speaker at that time tries to ensure that everything is done such that there is minimal repetition, safe to state if there is agreement with what has been uttered by the preceding speaker. And I'm now corrected to the fact that the speakers are given 10 minutes within which to do the presentations. Having that, we will also give Eskom an opportunity to respond to questions at the end of the program and just provide an overall response, since it is the applicant. We have Mr. Khalib Kasim from Eskom, Mr. Desmond Tissa from the South Durban Community Environmental Group, and then we've got Mr. David Naika representing Anti-Pollution Watchdog of Mkomazi, Mr. David Hallows from Groundwork, Mr. Vusi Zweni representing Ubunye Bamahostela, Mr. Terence Ogle representing Unemployed Movement of Osterville, Mr. Devon Pillay representing Havenside Civics, Mr. Teddy Gavenda representing Chatsworth Civic Federation, Mr. JP Naresami representing KZN Fishers Forum, Madam Verushka Medut representing Market Users Committee, Mr. Betin Jakenthan representing Right to Know, and lastly, but not least, Madam Alice Thompson representing AdLife Africa, Durban. Before we proceed, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to all of us here to note that NERSA is actually an organization in mourning with the passing on of our dear colleague, Mr. Dennis Tommy Siemela, on the 14th of September 2022. Mr. Siemela was employed at NERSA as the head of Department for Electricity Licensing, Compliance and Dispute Resolution. Our heartfelt condolences to Mr. Siemela's family, friends, and colleagues on the loss of their loved one. May they and all of us find hope in the midst of sorrow and comfort in the midst of pain. I therefore humbly call upon all of us to please observe a moment of silence, noting Psalm 90, verse 12, which calls upon us to let God, I quote, teach us to number our days, that we may apply our hearts unto wisdom, close quote. Let's observe the moment of silence. Amen. We may proceed. May his precious soul rest in eternal peace. Allow me then, ladies and gentlemen, to then proceed to call upon Eskom, Mr. Talib Kasim, to then make the presentation. By now, Mr. Kasim, you've got the hang of it as to the requirements to be able to take the oath. You've got no objections to take the oath, sir?
No, Chair, I'm comfortable.
Thank you very much. Please raise your hand and affirm the following. Do you solemnly declare that the evidence you are going to give this panel is the truth and the whole truth?
I do, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. For the record, please state your name, company, and designation therein.
My name is Caleb Kestam. I'm the Chief Financial Officer of Eskom, Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You may then proceed with the presentation, sir.
Chair,
We should be
Chair,
followed by a round of questions from the panel.
yes. Chair, may I request that we also swear in my colleague Eric Shanmugam, because he's going to do half the presentation. Then when I'm done, he can just immediately continue. If that's fine with you?
That's fine with me, sir. May I get him then to take the oath? I take it that you've got no objections in taking the oath.
No
objections.
No
Thank
objections.
you. Thank you. Please raise your hand and affirm the following. Do you solemnly declare that the evidence you are going to give to this panel is the truth and the whole truth?
I do.
For the record, please state your name, company, and designation therein.
My name is Eric Shanmugam. I am in the employ of Eskom Generation, and I'm a senior manager in Generation.
Thank you very much. Let's then get started. You've got your 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Please don't go beyond that. And then we'll then ask you questions as you are now used to this process. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon to yourself, Chairperson, and the rest of the members. In Chair's presentation, fine, presentation mode. Just want to confirm.
Yep. Just switch it over to presentation mode. Yeah, it is now in presentation mode. You may proceed, sir.
Okay, thanks. Chair, I think firstly, just to remind the audience, in terms of the process, we're busy with the second and the third year in terms of the consultation that NERSA has put out for comment. This is following a court process that's it now needs to be consulted upon. And I think it's important.
So excuse me, Mr. Kasim, I really apologize. Mpemba, siyacela Ntuli baba, uvale video yako. Please, if you can switch off your video, and this is to all of us here. Please keep your videos off, as well as to mute yourselves. Tuli, muzi Ntuli, siyacela usize usivalele video so khona ukuqhubeka ngaphandle kokuphazamiseka. Yeah, you may proceed.
Thanks. Okay, thank you, Chair. Chair, I think what we highlight in this presentation that since the first year's determination and in the public hearings in January, there's some significant events that have taken place, and this update that affects this revenue determination is highlighted in this presentation. In particular, we take into account some of the key principles embedded in the determination of the 9.6%. We then adjust for that in the second and the third year. And there is also a court determination around the equity returns that have to be phased in over the next 4 years of about 15 billion per annum, with the last year being 14 billion. And Eskom makes a proposal in terms of the phasing in of the RCA for FY 2020 of 3.4 billion rand. What is important that since January, some key assumptions around the production side in terms of supply from the IPPs relating to the delays in certain projects coming online, and then also adding to that the energy emergency requirements in terms of the presidency intervention. That is also taken into account. We have updated our energy availability factor from January of 62% to 59%. And my colleague Eric will talk more detail around that, as well as the shutdown dates in terms of the respective power stations and the corresponding units. So what does this all mean in terms of the key changes that affects this revenue requirement? Firstly, from a sales perspective, when we compare our assumptions now in September compared to January, we see there's a 1.1 terawatt hour increase in sales volumes for FY 24. This drops by half a terawatt in FY 25. And then on a primary energy basis, in terms of total costs, we see that in FY 24, there's a 6.4 billion rand increase in total primary energy costs. We'll go into more detail on that later. And in FY 25, 10.7 billion. We have not changed our operating costs compared to our application and the January update for year one. That remains the same, and you will see that effectively the cost escalations on Eskom's O&M is well below the inflation numbers in terms of the next 2 years of the decision amount that was allowed in FY 23. Similarly, we believe that, and we have reviewed the regulatory asset base determination in year one. Eskom sticks with the evaluation, and hence there is no change in terms of the depreciation amounts that is included in this allowable revenue. Chairperson, just to reiterate, we have taken the principles to reduce the rear debts amounts that was in our original application. We effectively have made that zero per your year one decision. And number two, following the Minister of Finance announcement in February this year, Eskom will not be liable for carbon taxes in this financial period. So we didn't have reduced those costs out of the allowable revenue. So what does this all mean? I think importantly that from an Eskom perspective, the MYPD allowable revenue before RCAs and court orders have not changed from what was originally requested for 2 or 3 key reasons. One, in terms of the MFMA, we've consulted on an allowable revenue. We've not changed that, number one. Number two, in terms of the court order, we are implementing the allowable revenue in year 2 and 3 per the court order. And lastly, I think it's important that within all of this, although we amend the cost changes to reflect the latest reality of the production side, we still see that the average returns that Eskom is asking for overall is still below the targeted cost of capital. NASA has indicated that to be in their own determination of 10%. We see in FY24 1.7 and 1.58 in FY25. Here you will see then that proposal of the RCA being phased in on a 50% basis between the next 2 years, 1.7 billion. And we have then chairperson and members also provided the allowable revenue across the 3 licenses. We believe this is an important step in the right direction as the industry is in the unbundling process. I'm not going to go through the detail here, but just to highlight that as Eskom's proposal, we have not made allocations to the generation business. We believe that it's important as an industry to make a step to sustainability in the network businesses first, in transmission and then distribution. That will then put them on a revenue stream that is more sustainable. It will also allow us in the process of seeking it much more easier to get that. And more importantly, 2 out of more and more IPPs in terms of the different bid windows, taking into account the timing assumptions and also addressing some of the emergency purchases that are required. That will contribute 9% in terms of the price increase. And then in terms of Eskom's own primary energy, it is 7.8 in terms of Eskom's own costs. The big driver is the OCGTs. What has happened is that two important contributing elements there. One, the load factors on the diesel has increased from our assumption in January from 5% to 12% over the entire year, as well as the increase in the price of this commodity based on the Russian invasion of the Ukraine. Those price and oil commodities also affect your start-up fuel, and then that is also contributed in terms of a volume element. So I think that is, you will see our coal costs compared to your decision in 23 increases contributes 1.65% to the price increase, and the rest of the primary energy is effectively almost zero. That's just expressing the different components, and as to highlight that from a diesel perspective, volumes are 60% and price 40%, and on a fuel oil perspective, it's 74% for price in 24 and 26% in volume. Chairperson, just to highlight the RAB that was awarded in FY23 on the network side, effectively large alignment between of the generation asset base, and that's why we reviewed it. So in our proposal, one, it does demonstrate that in taking into account the 15 billion allocation as well as the RCAs, you will see in the return of assets on transmission, then will result in 8.65% in 24 and 8.7 in 25. And similarly, you can see 6.8% on distribution and 6.25. So from a financial viability perspective, from an Eskom perspective, we need 4 key elements to contribute to this. One, Eskom efficiencies in terms of our own products and services that we put together and then is included in this application. Number 2, the whole issue of getting to recovering these efficient costs and earning that full cost of capital. And that's the purpose of this consultation process by the regulator, collecting what is due to us in terms of what we built. Currently on municipalities, there is 50 billion owing to Eskom. And lastly, we are in discussions with government to address the 400 billion debt that sits on the balance sheet, which is not sustainable. Just to highlight that if we just address the balance sheet without addressing all the components, Eskom is not going to be on a financially viable situation, and we will remain then a burden on the fiscus. I think lastly but not least, it's important as we make changes and a step change in the revenue determination to reflectivity, we should also, based on the tariff plan that was submitted by Eskom, the last time we made adjustments to the tariff structures was 2012. is an important opportunity to make some step changes to address the changing electricity industry. So, Chair, I've highlighted all the key areas from my side. I will now hand over to my colleague Eric to specifically.
Thank you very, very much, Caleb. And Chair, through you, I think the objective today is to address the questions raised yesterday, specifically to look at the causes of the high levels of load shedding and the steps that Eskom is taking to curb it. I think later on in the session yesterday, there were also questions raised around the OCGT and the fuel oil usage. And so I'll give you some feedback on those as well. So Chair, I think through you, it's very important, when we talk about the present performance, we go back in history and go back in time. And I want to spend a few minutes on this slide because I think this gives context to a lot of issues that we are experiencing now. And it starts off in 1998. When one looks at the Energy White Paper, the government disagrees with and defers recommendations for the construction of new capacity. And we know that in 2007, the ex-president Thabo Mbeki, I think, openly, commented on government earning and hence steps to change that. Then moving into 2002, we see that in terms of maintenance, there's this instruction to keep lights on at all costs, and then that leaves, has led to us also reducing the maintenance that we had planned. Moving on then to 2007, the new bill starts late, but nevertheless it does start. And as a result, we know we've seen poor construction and execution leading to design defects. When one looks at the load shedding, we started in 2008. We start to see the plants consistently run at a much higher utilization. And I think that's very important because I have a slide to actually highlight that our old fleet, which is around 40 years average age, has been running well over 85% in terms of the utilization factor. And key to that was to make up for virtual capacity, running it way above its actually capacity. I want to just move on. In terms of 2015, we start to see the issues around coal corruption, moving away from conveyor to power station to actually road. And as a result of that, we've seen substandard coal being delivered to the stations, having a direct impact to the actual damage to our equipment and plant. And I'll take you through a few slides of that. Moving on then, in 2018, it's very important for us to remember the strike action. We still actually face some of the consequences of the 2018 strike action, and in Kendal specifically, we are still starting. 4 years later, we are recovering. 2019, for the first time, we hit stage 6 load shedding. Sadly, in July, and once again this week, we go into stage 6. I think in 2020, there was a plea through the GCE. In order for us to actually recover, there's a two-pronged approach. One is we definitely would need extra capacity, and we know that was already requested in 1998 for new capacity, in excess of 6 gigawatts. And then there was a conscious effort to say that we will invest in the reliability maintenance program in order for us to recover performance. We had to invest in planned maintenance. As we stand, I need to highlight that we sit with MES, the minimum emission standard. There's 16,000 gigawatts of generation capacity that's not compliant in terms of the existing legislation. Eskom has obviously appealed, and this decision is under review at the moment. Sadly, we also had the explosion in Medupi 4, meaning a further 720 megawatts taken out of the system. And we know that will only be commissioned in 2021. Moving into 2022, we see a declining performance, and that's where I think we have put in this assumption of 59% into the application. I want to highlight this specific slide, Chair, we do a benchmark. We're busy with the 2021 review, but the trend shouldn't be any different. What I want to highlight on this specific slide is when one looks at in the early 2000s, and when one looks at the energy utilization factor, we pretty much compared favorably with the international coal fleet. And what we do benchmark is against 48 other coal units that VGB does. But from 2012, what I need to highlight is that when one looks at the dotted lines, you'll start to see that the Eskom fleet is being pushed way above 85% compared to the international fleet that ranges between 30 and 60%. So I think it's very important to note, to compensate for the lower utilization in the international fleet, they've come in with new capacity and the renewables, which has obviously helped the international coal fleet. Sadly, on our side, we've not had the new capacity, and as a result, it's meant more wear and tear on our older equipment, and we sit with an average age of 40 years. We have to acknowledge that the higher utilization has meant more failure, has meant against the backdrop of also not having sufficient funds to do midlife refurbishment and reliability maintenance. We've seen an increase in the number of failures, in the number of trips, and as a result, the breakdowns have increased. And when one looks at this specific trend, we see that the EAF is decreasing. But what I need to highlight is when one compares this to the international fleet, the trend is also very similar. As much as our EAF has decreased substantially, but when one compares the energy utilization factor, it has resulted in the EAF decreasing substantially. Then just to respond to the question raised yesterday in terms of what are we doing to address the load shedding, I think what I've done is I've broken the slides into three parts. The immediate is the recovery in terms of units. What I can confirm as of 8 o'clock this morning, we are recovering 8,000 megawatts. There's 14 units at the various substations that will recover over the next 4 days. And we are hoping in the next 4 days to drop the load shedding from stage 6 to stage 2. I think the objective is over the weekend, hopefully we can get back into, get into stage 2. In terms of the plan to sort of end load shedding, what we've done is we've set up a short-term plan for success. We've put in structures to actually turn around the operational performance. We've set up war rooms, and there's going to be continued focus on reliability maintenance. I think what's critical is for us to guard against the flagship performance stations. So the Letabos, the Matimbas, and the Peking, which are performing well, we need to ensure that they continue to actually perform. In terms of the feedback we've given to the presidency, and which is being addressed to the Energy Crisis Committee, we've identified top six stations: Tutuka, Duva, Majuba, Kusile, Matla, and Kendall. And so in terms of all our efforts, we'll be going into those stations as we are focusing on shutting the older stations in the next 2 to 3 years. We have to focus on returning Kuberg. Hopefully Kuberg will return in the next week. And there's a big effort right now to source external specialized skills to help generation recover on the performance. Looking at the medium to long term, the intent is to move and aspire towards 70%. Once again, we'll continue with the performance, but then focusing on Matimba, Letabo, Medupi, Kriel, and Arnott. I think as we move past 2024, we'll hopefully have the Kusile units and the Medupi 4 back in service. We'll be focusing on closure of the oldest link. The unreliability of the older stations will also help increase the average EAF of the generation fleet. Repeat the slide, but just to highlight, as a result of the unreliable fleet, the unpredictability of failure, the high number of trips, what Eskom does is pretty much, compared to the country loss, is much cheaper. And we do appreciate, I think it is high. And when one looks at the year-to-date performance is 14. And hence, I think, as the CFO has highlighted, the higher application for OCGTs in the next year. Then just in terms of fuel oil, I think looking at the previous slide and this slide, the CFO has highlighted the increase in the gas prices as well as fuel oil costs. We've seen that impact on our side as well, which has definitely contributed to the higher costs. But what I need to highlight is that we've identified the culprit stations. We know where the problems are contributing towards the high fuel oil costs. There's a lot of focus on the milling plant, which is which actually is primary in terms of ensuring quality, coal quality into the power stations. We know that there's also focus on improving the quality of coal. And I think there's additional efforts in terms of reducing fuel costs. We know that there's some security measures which we've communicated through the media. There's a fuel oil management system that we are using to track and to management. In the interim, we are tracking this manually. I think through our treasury, we are also hedging against the fuel oil prices. We'll constantly monitor. Last two slides. So we have regrouped our efforts, which we have communicated to the presidency. I think what I need to highlight to recover on EAF, we have to ensure that there's new adequate capacity coming in so that the Eskom fleet, we ensure we could lessen the burden on the utilization factor, but it will also give us then the opportunity to do good planned maintenance. We will also focus on skills and experience to ensure rebuild the competency and ultimately help with the actual procurement. We've also seen that in terms of funding to the outage budgets, which allows for us to plan now over a longer term. We have to plan over a 24-month period to the unplanned load losses. And I think any improvement in these stations will see a massive change in the EAF. Lastly, Chair, what I need to highlight is in July this year, the presidency, I think, outlined 5 initiatives. Of those 5, I think 2 critical to generation. One is the immediate focus on improving the availability of. 2 is enabling and accelerating new private investment. I think Eskom is also playing a critical role here in terms of enablement, where we are allocating the Mpumalanga area, where we could have immediate capacity, knowing that there's constraints from the Eastern Cape and the Western Cape. So, Chair, that's it from my side. That's given you assurance to the efforts from generation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We're done from a Eskom perspective.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kasim and Eric there. We appreciate and Chanduk. I would then like to take this opportunity and get the members of the panel to make their presentations. So to ask questions. I was just a bit disturbed by Mr. Tissa there. Just wait, Mr. Tissa. We're gonna just do the questioning and responses. Once they are provided, we'll then proceed to you.
No problem, Chair. No problem.
Thank you very much. Members of the panel, any questions to Eskom? By show of hands. Mr. Dlamini, please help me. If I don't see hands, if I miss some hands, could be a technical challenge on my side.
There are none, sir.
Okay, there are none. Okay, I note that. I think so. Congratulations, Eskom, for a good presentation on your side, having started the process of responding as you had promised, and stating that you are still also going to augment what you have provided us with a written submission. But I would just like to ask you just again, just further clarification, if you may provide. I just want to understand from your side, in terms of government being the shareholder and us actually having one government as a point of departure, that we've got one government, be it national, provincial, or local government, but it's one government. So I would like to get your understanding and agree. If now there is an intervention by government.
Sorry, Mr. Mkhize, Mr. Pukula's hand is up, sir.
Oh, Mr. Pukula's hand is up. All right, let me first give him an opportunity, then I would come after he has presented.
Thank you. Apologies, I don't know why it was not showing on your side. Are you able to hear me?
I'm able to hear you now. You may proceed. It's loud and clear.
Thank you. So, President, I just have two questions for Eskom. One is that when Eskom makes an application to NASA, it has to go through certain approval processes, and I think SALGA has to comment, and National Treasury has to comment. I just want confirmation from Eskom that the changes they've made, National Treasury and SALGA have commented. The second one is, I know that there are court decisions that have been made. I want to get a view or a feel from Eskom that the changes that they have made, do they consider them not to be substantial enough for us to restart the process? Because they the bottom line doesn't change, but there are changes that are within that members that are providing inputs may feel that they have not been provided with sufficient time to interrogate or understand what these changes are. And if Eskom can give a view on why they've made the changes, and why do they think that the stakeholders that comment on this should not be commenting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pukula. Madam Sibiya.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. Apologies. I was just locked off a bit due to coming back of power in my area. The question that I have for Eskom is with regards to OCGTs. I do understand the issue of the price. When you look at FY24 and FY25, the issue of volumes. The question I have, Chair, is Eskom now using OCGTs as a base load? Because when you see the volumes constituting more than 50%, which is 60% increase, is that because Eskom is now using OCGTs as a base load? Thank you, Chair.
Just also to add on my questions, I can see there's Alumutu Perumal who has raised a hand. We've said public hearing that members of the public should direct whatever questions that they have, send them to eliezer.dlamini@nersa.org.za for the panel to then consider those questions and see how they then offer the public an opportunity to ask presenters. But it is through that channel that we think those would be accommodated. So please just bear with me there. Right. With regard to my question, I was looking at slide, especially the slide 17 to 20. On those slides, I'm saying I take it that government is the shareholder, and there's one government in South Africa, irrespective of whether it's national, provincial, and local. If that understanding is etched in our minds, I think it will then help in terms of understanding my questions. If there is the same understanding that we share, if you may just indicate Eskom, or otherwise, or maybe hold a different view, please assist me in that regard. When it comes to the EAF, at one stage it was 72, and then you in fact it was on the northern side of 75. Then you promised to increase it even further, but it has decreased instead. Now it's gone to the unprecedented 59. And I just want to get to understand from your side to say, how do you envisage that the users, the end users, be dealt with fairly, where a unit that was supposed to be producing at 85%, but is actually doing 59%? How then that consumer needs to be treated fairly in terms of a high RAB, as well as the high cost associated therewith? If you can just help me to get that understanding, and also it then gels with the OCGTs to say, why would you then have the cost element for the OCGTs? How do you treat it? Because it's replacing, for argument's sake, let's say it's replacing the 26% that is not provided by the coal plants. If that viewpoint is incorrect, please just assist me to get clarity in that regard. On I think it's slide 20, where actually the costs that you are talking about are actually within the control of Eskom. May you please just explain to me, why would the end user be held liable for costs that actually are within the control of the entity, and by extension of the shareholder, which then the shareholder, as the owner of the business, must then shoulder? But Eskom requiring external specialized skills. I mean, Eskom is a very old organization. I just want to understand here, what actually has Eskom been doing all along to skill its employees such that they are able then to deliver? Even this makeup, there is minimal requirement for this. I'm a bit unsure. And then you that slide on utilization, I think it's slide 18 on utilization. You know, I think if you can help that, we compare like for like, because normally you can afford to have low utilization if you've got more capacity on many modules than the demand. If you can please talk to that and that utilization, because I think it will help for you if you can please drill down on that and provide that information to our technical team, for the NERSA technical team to interrogate those figures, so you can make proper comparison, to compare apples with apples. Please, if you can just provide that information for good comparison. And then if you can just help me here also, there was money that was allocated for maintenance previously. Can you please provide a reason why that money should not be clawed back? Because it doesn't seem that this maintenance has yielded the expected results. That would be my last question. Thank you. You may respond from Eskom side, please.
Thank you, Chairperson. I'll start and then Eric will come in with the technical responses. Chair, I may start with Mr. Bakula's questions. The first one, in terms of these changes, have they been consulted with SALGA and National Treasury? I think firstly, Mr. Bakula, number one, for us to provide updated assumptions around sales and especially production costs. And we've done so in terms of this methodology for revenue. So when we've consulted to SALGA and National Treasury in the original application, that is the allowable revenue that was consulted upon. And as I've said in my presentation, we are implementing as well the court order that says now go and deal with year 2 and year 3 of the original application. So that's the basis on which this information is provided at these public hearings, like we've done so in the past. If I didn't deal with the question in terms of information like around the court orders, should more time be given for stakeholders to take this on board? I think 2 points there. I think number one is this relates as far back as MYPD 4. Eskom is waiting to basically recover this money that was incorrectly deducted in the first place by NERSA. It's a number of years down the line, and we are implementing the court order that was allocated. So we don't believe that consulting on that is going to make any difference. We have in this proposal, you will see that in terms of the previous RCAs or court decisions, this impact is very minimal in terms of a price increase. If I deal with Ms. Sibia's question around OCGTs as a base load, obviously based on the overall performance of the system, and Eric will elaborate on it, we are dispatching the OCGTs in terms of the requirements of the dispatch rules, as well as the good code, and as a last resort to minimize the amount of interruptions in terms of supply and demand mismatch to the economy. We all appreciate that this is much more lower cost in OCGTs versus the cost to the economy. If I didn't deal with the shareholder question from the chairperson, I think if I understood the question correctly, at the end of the day, yes, it is one government, but even government must recover its cost of capital, etc. And what we are seeing here in the amount of allowable revenue, Eskom isn't recovering its full cost of capital. And I think over and above the operating costs, I think that is the gap that we have in terms of the revenue that is granted to Eskom. Cost of capital is not zero. It must be recovered. And as long as you don't recover it, there is then, as I've indicated, this continuous burden that will remain on the fiscus. And like I've answered yesterday, at the end of the day, it's either the electricity consumer will have to contribute to that cost or the taxpayer. And in our studies, from an Eskom perspective, it indicates that the more efficient way is for the consumer to contribute to that cost. Chair, I'll let Eric deal with the technical questions. Thank you. Eric.
Thank you, Caleb. So I think, Chair, to respond to Sir Precious Sabea's question in terms of OCGTs, Caleb, I think, has responded in terms of the reasons for the high utilization. I think when we do the studies, it's directly correlated to the low EAF, and we've acknowledged that. Hence, for the short-term recovery, it's to cater for a higher load factor on the OCGT, and then it's to then stabilize back to 1%, but that's obviously, I think, beyond 3 years. In the short term, I think my understanding is we're looking at about a 5%. The issue around the fleet performance, I think once again, Chair, going back to the slide where I've highlighted the energy utilization factor, I think one can bring it down to a car. But can you imagine running your car constantly without giving it the opportunity to rest for a service, for a mini service, for a major service? Surely through that high utilization of that vehicle, you're going to start to see a lot of the moving parts, because that's what power stations are. Power stations have a lot of moving parts. You start to see these moving parts break, and hence the plea to have the funding. So our fleet has been running in the red zone as our cars. Can you imagine the cars ref counter constantly on the red zone? So hence the plea to do the maintenance, have the space, and in doing good reliability maintenance, it's some things we have to do to get at least the 6 power stations that I've identified. And those are not the older fleet, those are pretty much the midlife fleet, to spend money on that. Equally, to also do midlife refurbishment, because we have not done midlife refurbishment on this fleet. What I need to also then highlight is that, I think the question posed by the chair was, how does this, affect the consumer? Is it fair to the consumer? And I think what I need to stress that, we are actually an implementer of policy, and often the decisions made by government, we have no choice but to actually adopt and implement. So there's factors beyond the control of Eskom, which we had to abide by. I think one goes back to the IRP. We know the delay in the actual finalization of the IRP 2019. We've now seen coming up, even in terms of the Electricity Crisis Committee, where the IRP will be aggressively updated to look at a much more longer term. And one of the key issues, Chair, which I need to highlight, is that the IRP is the plan, but when one looks at implementation of this new capacity against the plan, we've not done very well as a country. And what that has resulted in is the Eskom fleet running exceptionally high. What I need to highlight is, in terms of the question that you've raised in terms of National Treasury allocating some money, if you go to specifically the slide that shows EAF, what I want to highlight in that specific slide, in 2014 and 2015, funds were allocated. We consciously had a program where we had to recover on the backlog, and you'll see the very positive impact of that in 2016 and 2017, where you'll see the EAF actually climbed. So it has been as a direct result of forced interventions focusing on outage maintenance. Having said that, we went back into the normal cycle where funds became a constraint, and we know that we've highlighted that through the media statements. We've once again not done the midlife refurbishment. We've not focused, and hence in 2020, this focused drive to actually do planned reliability maintenance. So, Chair, I think hopefully I've actually addressed the last issue in terms of the benchmarks. I think through our secretariat, we'll definitely ensure that we will submit that information, and we'll provide more technical detail to your technical team so that we could engage further. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Panel members.
Thanks. Then we'll appreciate if you can augment the responses as already indicated, particularly when it comes to slide 18, showing those utilization figures. I will then give just a follow-up on what on your responses. Give Mr. Pukula an opportunity. Mr. Pukula, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Chairperson. I just wanted to check and confirm, according to Mr. Kalib, that when they make changes to the application, I mean, I'm not talking about the bottom line, because even the bottom line really has been a manipulation of the numbers. There is no requirement for National Treasury or SALGA to have some form of consultation. If that's the case, I will take that off. And I think meaningful consultation is not on the bottom line, it's on the elements that make the bottom line. So if it is not required, it's fine. I know that according to the methodology, it can be done and will be considered, but I'm asking in making a reapplication if National Treasury and SALGA do not need to be consulted as a matter of fact and law. Thank you.
Chairperson, in terms of that, we are happy to come back in writing and also get a legal input on that one, Chair, if that's fine.
Thank you. I noticed also in your response saying that Eskom isn't recovering its full cost of capital. I would just like us to, if you can just provide further justification for this, noting at the same time the prudency. I would like to know when we can be able to look at from your side as to when you envisage that you look at prudence. You know, we've got prudence guidelines as the regulator, and those were I mean, like extensively consulted with the industry. I would like to know maybe if you've got any time that you intend to build prudence assessment exercise with regard to your projects and the overall running of the plan, both from a CAPEX and an OPEX perspective. But before you respond, may I please get Mr. Pugula then, because I see your hand is up again.
Apologies, Chair, it's latent. I will remove it.
Chair, to your question, I mean, from our perspective, we believe we put in an application that is based on prudency and efficiencies. Obviously, yourself as the regulator and in terms of your own prudency assessment, you would do that together with the inputs you would get from various stakeholders. That is and you also follow up this with, as Eric has indicated, the benchmark studies that we have done to complement our application. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Thanks for the responses, Caleb and Eric. We appreciate that. We'll then proceed to go to Mr. Desmond Tissa of the South Durban Community Environmental Group. Mr. Tissa, do you have any objection in taking the oath?
I don't have a problem, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Please just pardon me for the background noise. I hope you're still going to be able to hear me.
I can.
Please raise your hand and affirm the following. Do you solemnly declare that the evidence you are going to give to this panel is the truth and the whole truth?
I solemnly swear that the evidence I'm going to give to this panel is the truth and the whole truth.
Thank you. For the record, please state your name, company, organization, and designation therein.
Desmond Tissa, the coordinator of the South Durban Community Environmental Alliance in Durban, South Africa.
Thank you very much, Sam. May you please proceed? You've got your 10 minutes. Then we're going to ask a round of questions.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, but I hope I'm not going to be cut off because Eskom had a long time. And you know, I've been here since 2008 when NERSA was formed. Formation of NERSA, we made it obvious that it's clear that Eskom at that time, where they can just take money out of the society of South Africa and do what they want to do. And since 2008, the warning signs have been out there, Chair. And for those that know us, are fully aware that this issue of continue to come and apply for huge sums of money has been the Eskom program, so that they can get more money and more money. So you can imagine now, we are in 2022, we still have load shedding. Maintenance is still a problem. If one analyzes all the years, all Eskom's applications, you will find that they were being inconvenienced with the truth. They've applied for funds for maintenance. They've applied for funds for renewable energy. They went for the World Bank loan, and despite the fact that we objected to building Kusile and Medupi, they got the 400 billion that we are now saddled with as a country as a whole. We're all aware that the new bills, what Eskom has been inconvenient is not telling the truth here today. Mr. Kasim and Eddie has not told the truth. When they went for the bill to build Medupi, they had serious problems. It overran the cost, and it never operated fully. And every year we've come here, we've heard the same story. They're going to get there. They need more money to get there. Medupi never operated, and even now, Medupi 4 is not operating. The same thing with Kusile. They needed more money, and yet they took the loan from the World Bank and the African Bank and other banks. And Kusile hasn't operated, and still hasn't operated fully as well. How many years is that, Chair? This is over. I can tell you now, this is about 14 years. And both those power stations that were built, the third and fourth biggest power stations in the world, in a water scarce area of Waterberg, where people are suffering, don't even have access to energy. We still have the problems with Medupi and Kusile, and the pollutions of very high level. We are the biggest polluter on the continent through the efforts of Eskom, where they've externalized the costs. And that's what's not been brought on the table yet. In their presentation, they never spoke about the high levels of pollution and the water scarce area. They never spoke about the externalizing the costs where people are breathing in toxic fumes every day and getting sick from it. And what they didn't talk about, Chair, is the poor communication. There's a parastatal that is owned by the people of this country. We are now being told there's no need to consult with us. And yet every year they've come here to beg for money from NERSA, from the National Energy Regulator. But they don't need to consult with us because they believe that they can approve it. NERSA is going to approve it and they will get the money. They talk about the renewable energy in their presentation. But they had the money in 2011 when the UNFFC, United Nations Framework on Climate Change, was held in Durban. They had the money to roll out renewable energy and they didn't do that. And when we constantly asked them, where is that money? No one could give us a response to what happened to the money. Now, we hear about the coal. Every year, last year, we heard the same story. We've been hearing about the poor coal quality and objects in the coal. But you can't tell me it takes you years to sort that out. Or you can change the coal supplier. Or you can ensure that the coal that's been brought to the power stations is of a standard that there are checks and that the quality is checked. You can't come here every year and say the same thing and blame the coal, but you haven't done nothing and you've shown nothing of what you have done. Chair, the other thing about what Eskom has done here is to put the blame game. Well, we have problems, the power stations are not operating because we have problems with money. Or when we had the money like in 2014 and 2015, we were quite doing well. But you will all know that in 2014 and 2015 and 2016, throughout the year, we've had load shedding in this country. So how can they come here and say everything was okay when we've had load shedding even during that period that they claim that everything was okay? And all you got to do is, Chair, look at the evidence. Go back in the history of Eskom, which they don't want to do. You know why? It's going to point fingers at bad management, poor management, lack of management, a lack of knowledge, and a lack of doing the right thing to ensure that the citizens of this country are not given load shedding, that the companies of this country are not given load shedding, and that it affects everybody else. To the issue of the rebuild, I want to say this here. Eskom has failed to consult with the people of this country. Even when the emissions were the highest in this country, they went to the courts and tried to silence civil society because the people on the high fault were affected with it, and tried to ensure that they do not comply with the laws of this country. Whether you are government parastatal or not, you have to comply with the laws like every other citizen. Eskom tried to subvert the law and went to court and tried to not comply with the Air Quality Act and asked for amendments and asked for a deferment to not comply. And they were given by the Department of Minerals and Energy as well as the Department of Environmental Affairs. So they never wasted money. Where they were supposed to have invested huge amounts of money to reduce the pollution that impacts on people on the Highveld and everyone else in Johannesburg, Mpumalanga, Limpopo, they deferred all that through the power that they have and the lawyers that they have to go to court and defer our right to a clean and healthy environment, which they have deferred. Now they say they consult National Treasury to get money, and they admit that it's the taxpayers' money. So if they are consulting National Treasury, which is the government, which is the treasury of all the people of this country, and they consult to them, how is it that they can't consult with the ordinary citizens of this country when they're having all these major bills that they want to do? Nuclear energy. We heard at one stage in Parliament, Eskom was pushing the nuclear bill. The other states, they've been pushing more coal-fired power stations, and civil society has had to stand up and say, the plan that you have hasn't been thought carefully out. The plan that you have is going to come to an end, and you should look at moving to alternative right now. Eskom is, despite the fact of understanding that we need to move to a just transition, we need to upskill the labor, we need to provide secure jobs for the labor. Eskom is deliberately slowing and trampling on the just transition so that those that are affected from climate change will get relief, and they're not doing that. Chair, you've heard Mr. Kasim and Mr. Eddy, and I've heard him several times in the hearings talk about this, and today again, the same rhetoric continues to come out. They don't need to consult with anyone. I think that they want to show us that they're bigger than even NERSA. That NERSA has got no say in this matter, and they'll run to court and they'll win the battle in court. And I think that's undermining the National Energy Regulator. And I think it is totally wrong of them to say that they do not need to consult. They must consult with everybody that's interested and affected, even the regulator. They must consult with everybody. Not only when they need money, but in everything else, in developing the energy needs for this country. They must consult with every one of us. What we keep hearing, Chair, since 2008, and I've been at the Energy Regulator public hearings and presenting around the issue of why NERSA should not allocate any increases. And I continue to say no to any increases because it deprives our people. Millions of our people are off the grid because they can't afford. Millions of our people are not even got access to the grid. So how can Eskom claim that we need the money, that they can take it from the consumers? Which consumers are they talking about? Because people are already off the grid. You're taking it out from a few people. They're not bringing up the numbers of how many people they are talking about Because, Chair, they have not mentioned that there's a difference in tariffs. When it comes to the 35 or 50 major users of energy, they pay 1/10 of the cost that ordinary citizens in this country use. And those are mostly the poor and marginalized. And Eskom wants to get a free ride and get all the money from the poor consumers of this country. And I think it'll be a travesty of justice if NERSA grants them that increase today. I think they should never get another cent out of poor people in this country. People are already marginalized, huge unemployment, people are going to bed hungry, and NERSA cannot do that and allow Eskom to get away with that by giving them an increase. The further thing there of the externalizing of the cost, besides the health things that I spoke about, is also with all these load shedding. Eskom is responsible for all the appliances, fridges and microwaves and stoves and all that are blown up. And they do not want to come and compensate people for that. Let alone all the food, because some people get a pension once a month, so they buy all their food. All their food is turned to rotten because the fridges are off and they can't keep their food in any fridge because Eskom had load shedded. And not one load shed, sometimes 3 and 4 times of load shedding in a day. So they haven't come with the facts. They keep playing games with the people of this country, and they must be told that they must go and recover all the money that is stolen from Eskom all these years, those billions of rands that are stolen not only by the governors, but also all those CEOs that they pay bonuses and all that. And these guys, both Kasim and Eddie, know fully about it. They must recover the money there. Now to the issue of Eddie's point of a car, that you need to, if you drive a car, you can't keep it going. But then you must plan. If you're an engineer, if you're a planner and all that, you plan well in advance. And you ensure that when you plan, you got schedules of dates and you maintain it. You can't come and tell you 4 or 5 power stations will go down at the same time. Something's wrong. Something is stinking in Eskom. So we can't be continue to tell people, well, this power station went up, and then next month the same power station goes. Something is wrong. If you don't plan properly, you don't have all the spares, you don't have the experienced people, you're going to constantly have this. Even if they get the increase, Eskom is in such a mess, it's never going to recover now, Chair. And we can't pour money on something that is rotten. Because if we do that, we deprive the people of this country from changing over and moving to a new energy mix. Now, just to the funds allocated, I want to say this here, Chair. Eskom has gone to the courts. They ran to court and took the National Energy Regulator to court to get more money, because the energy regulator listened to the people of this country. And I remember, Chair, it was 8%. They wanted 24%. And it's been a regular, from 2008, it's been 24%, 25%, 30%. Even at one stage, they wanted 36%. We don't have pots of money in this country in all our homes. We know for a fact that if you don't manage a utility like Eskom properly, then we all suffer. We want Eskom. We need an Eskom that's viable, that's working well. But it can't be that they're on their own, that there's no discussion, that they're not listening to the people of this country. And it can't be that you're throwing money at them all the time because they can't fix the problem. If the problem, they haven't told us, yeah. They said, oh, they're dealing with it. But they haven't said in time frames so that the people of this country can take them into confidence that on this day, we'll have everything up and running. We'll make sure that this is going right. We'll have experienced people employed. We'll upskill people. We are going to invest and spend so many millions on renewable energy. We're going to bring in all that day. They haven't said nothing of that sort. Once they get an increase from the National Energy Regulator, you'll never hear them, and they'll never come back and invest the money that is required to move to renewable energy. They won't do it. They've not done it over the years, and they've lied at all the hearings they've come to, where they have made presentation. It hasn't been honest, Chair. And I've been a witness to all this here. And I think NERSA, National Energy Regulator, you as the panelists, must do the right thing for the citizens first. Let's put people first. rather than those that are seeking money all the time. Because when they get the money, they forget about the people of this country. We'll have more load shedding. To stop load shedding, they need to produce plans. They need to show what they are doing. They haven't come here and showed what they've done since 2008. They haven't showed, even when they spoke about 2040 and 2050, what did they do if they believe that they fixed the problem? Why is it the same problem ongoing continuously? Something is not right, that this is an ongoing problem which we have all of us in this country have highlighted and brought it to attention. They have been inconvenient with the truth. They haven't provided all the evidence. When I read that, when I saw that presentation of figures, cut and paste, Chair, cut and paste and coming to present us as if we are all blind to it and we all hard of hearing. Chair, we want Eskom not to be privatized, but we also want Eskom to work for the interests of these people, and we cannot allow that there be many blackouts. We already got millions of people in Soweto and all over Johannesburg, all over KZN. Our cities are black, completely black. That is why we have all the rapes, we have all the crime, we have people going to bed without food. This is a daily occurrence of this load shedding. And the way to stop it, Chair, is to make sure the determination that is done takes into consideration all the views that we are bringing here today, to ensure that that is considered. And when the determination is made by the panelists, let us make sure that you as panelists can sleep well at night. And you're not going to toss and turn, because now Eskom has got a get out card. A get out card means that they're going to get relief from NERSA. And I'm hoping that is not the case, that NERSA will not give them no relief, send them packing, let them go back to the drawing board, and let them come back and talk and come with a proper plan before we give them any increase. We've had load shedding constantly. We've heard the story. We are fixing it. We are working on it. This has been going on for years, 3 years of it. If we continue throwing money at them, the people of this country will continue to suffer. I leave it there, Chair. Thank you so much. Yabong.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Tisa. Members of the panel, do you have any questions?
Covered, Chair.
Okay, if you don't have any from your side, Mr. Pukula.
None, Chair, yeah.
Thank you. We noted your presentation. Advocate Tole, I see your hand is up. Please, you may pose your questions.
Thank you, Chairperson. And just one point of clarity to Mr. Desa. Thank you for the presentation that he has made. There's one thing that he mentioned in his presentation, which was that he doesn't want Eskom to be privatized. And on the other hand, he has highlighted Eskom's numerous requests for higher tariffs. I just wanted to get clarity in terms of those two scenarios. How best does he think Eskom should continue to exist, and as well as provide the services that is expected by the population of this particular country, and as well as the businesses in our country. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. I see no other hand. Mr. Tisa, may you please respond?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to Advocate Sitole. The reason that we oppose privatization, we have a huge growing population in this country that's unemployed. The vast majority of our people live in townships in rural areas, do not have access to the grid. And at the moment, Eskom, at least there is some sensitivity in that they are providing energy in the townships, in the towns, and the cities. And if we privatize, it means that the tariffs are going to go higher, and people won't even be able to afford even that.
Mr. Tisa? Oh, you are covered, Madam Advocate Tole. Thanks for that. Let's then.
So the tariff, the higher tariffs is not going to help the ordinary people on the streets, and you know, it'll just mean more blackouts in our township that's already there, and it just means that things will get worse, and people will struggle to cook food and provide food for their children. It means that people will have to go back to wood and coal and all that, those things that really create harm to people's health. We've already seen in Mashaleni, in Sasolburg and the mining communities where they're using coal, and that indoor pollution is a huge impact. So we need electricity, we need engine to Eskom to be stable, we need the proper management of Eskom, but we cannot afford that the tariffs go high, and whilst the people that make profit are getting away with it. So there has to be an equalization of costs. And yeah, I'm saying that the big business will ship all their profits to the New York Stock Exchange, the London Stock Exchange, or the Australian Stock Exchange, especially the big aluminium users of energy. They should pay the cost because they make profit. I have no qualms about that. And the rich people in South Africa should pay the cost. It can't be that you would equate them with poor people in this country, and therefore the tariffs are very high. It's not like a step-up tariff. It's a tariff that's right across.
Thank you.
So and that is why I'm saying don't privatize Eskom. We need to keep the company within the realms of government, but the company has to be managed correctly and rightfully. And at the same time, got to ensure that the vast majority, because that's what Madupi and Kusini was all about, was that we're going to take this 400 billion rand loan, and then we'll provide, our people will have access to energy.
Please, if you may just wrap up, Mr. Tisa, please, in terms of your response.
So we found that our people still don't have access. So we take all these big loans and we find that people don't have access. And now the whole talk around privatization of it, and at the same time, you wanting the people of South Africa to pay for those loans. I think that the privatization, the World Bank knew that they should never have given Eskom loan, and therefore the people of this country cannot be paying high tariffs to do that. And wherever they privatize things, it hasn't been to the benefit of the vast majority of poor people. In fact, it's benefit rich and the least of the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This then ends the agenda item 3 in terms of the presentation and responses by Mr. Tisa. We then proceed to Mr. David Naika of the Anti-Pollution Watchdog of Mkomas. Mr. David Naika, if you may step forward, please. Is Mr. David Naika in, Mr. Dlamini?
Yes, I had seen him, Mr. Mkhize. I did admit him.
Mr. Naika? In the absence of Mr. Naika, then let me proceed to the next person. Mr. David Hallows from Groundwork. Are you in, sir?
He is also in, sir.
I am.
Thank you very much. Yes, can hear you. If you may please just confirm that you don't have an objection to taking an oath.
No objection.
Okay, if you may raise your hand and affirm the following. Do you solemnly declare that the evidence you are going to give to this panel is the truth and the whole truth?
I do.
Thank you. For the record, please state your name, company or organization that you represent, and your designation therein.
My name's David Hallows. I do research for Groundwork, which is an environmental justice organization.
Thank you. Then you may proceed. You've got your 10 minutes.
Thank you. Right. I don't know, can I share a screen?
Please do.
Does that work?
No, we don't see anything from our side.
Okay,
Only
well then I'll go ahead without. I'll go ahead without sharing then. Right. Basically, as I read the addendum, we've got a standard tariff this year of 146. It goes up to 193 and to 212 in 24 and 25. And the municipal increases follow on that. At the moment, eThekwini's tariff is 224. If that tariff is raised by the same amount, i.e. 47 cents in 2024, then that goes up to R2.71. So a household consuming 400 kilowatt hours a month is then going to be paying 1,084 Rand. If it goes up by 32%, then that amount will be 1,184 Rand for a household consuming 400 kilowatt hours a month. And I'd just like to compare that with the present pension, which is 1,980, or with the child support grant at 480. Basically, people can't afford it. And just to note, I'm not aware of us having any participation in the municipal tariff applications. So I'd like clarity on whether we do get such participation. Overall, it seems to me that the system has failed. Eskom keeps telling us that it is starved of funds, that the tariffs are below cost of production, and that this is the fundamental problem. Clearly, everybody else is saying we can't afford it. So you have a system which is basically failing on both sides. And it's a failure of the coal power system itself. That system wasn't just about Eskom, it was about Eskom and users. It was developed by and for the minerals energy complex, the big industrial users. And the model was of big coal power plants to supply big base load to those consumers specifically. That model, under the costs of its own expansion on of the building of Medupi and Kusile, which broke Eskom essentially. The old MEC corporations are leaving, and they're leaving their environmental liabilities behind. The energy-intensive users group demanded big base plants, but have now abandoned that model and want to pass the costs of trying to replicate that model onto the rest of society. And I see that there are, or at least as I read it, there are more and more negotiated pricing agreements being done, which are about reduced costs to those big users, which must then be those costs then go presumably to the rest of the customer base. As far back as MYPD 2, we said that the issue is not the funding model. We are being asked to pay for the wrong energy model, and it's wrong on the choice of power generation, on what and who the power is for, on the social and environmental externalities, and on the neglect of consultation by Eskom as to it is basically still wrong on all those points in our view. There are a number of big issues which are still not addressed, although government keeps promising that they will be. Municipal debt to Eskom is unpayable. And the claim on those municipalities tends to entrench poverty because it's mainly poor municipalities who the claimed Soweto debt is unpayable, and it basically looks like a blind estimate with interest added onto it. Following the NERSA decision to disallow arrear debt, Eskom says this burden has been moved to the fiscus. I'd like to understand what exactly that means. What burden has been moved? Is it the provision for impairment, or is it the whole of the debt? Has this been agreed by Treasury? What is happening with the municipal debt? The other big issue that is not addressed is the Minerals Energy Complex Debt Society for 100 years of environmental vandalism. Eskom has now been called on to mitigate its ongoing pollution, but says it can't afford it, and I'll come back to that a bit later. The big cost drivers on the tariffs have been the new build and coal, basically. Eskom says that it's containing these costs. We don't really see much evidence of that. And it now says that the big costs increases are from the independent power producers. We think that there's a false equivalence being drawn between primary energy as coal costs against the cost of electricity delivered onto the grid. And as I say that, I do also want to emphasize that this whole model of privatizing renewable energy is not one that we support, for much the same reasons that Des has already mentioned in terms of privatization. I'd like to understand what is going on in terms of how these costs are being allocated within Eskom. The logic of the Eskom's divisions is of the new division of Eskom is that the system operator, i.e. transmission, buys power from all generators, including Eskom generation, the imported power, and the IPPs. Eskom's addendum gives a breakdown for each division. In table 4 and 5 of that addendum, it attributes the cost of imports and IPPs to generation, i.e. this suggests that generation buys the power and then sells to transmission. So I'd like to understand what goes on there, that laying out the costs and allocating them this way seems to us to obscure cost comparisons between coal and renewables, and it maintains that false equivalence between primary energy costs and the cost of delivered energy. There's been a repeated thing around protecting the poor in Eskom's applications. We need to recall that the bottom 60% of people in this country are poor on official statistics. Many use electricity as well as paraffin, wood, and coal, and as the price of electricity goes up, so people are forced to rely on dirty energies indoors. So there's a double cost to the poorest, one on their health and one on the increase in costs. It's worth bearing in mind that the next 20% of people, in other words, the people in the 60 to 80% of income in South Africa, are vulnerable to slipping into poverty, and many in this group are actually tied to electricity. So as this extraordinary escalation in cost goes up, so those people are pushed ever closer to slipping into poverty. People are having to make choices between food and the means to cook it, between electricity and other essentials such as school costs, and between choosing who will eat. And I'd just like to quote something from the Pietermaritzburg Economic Justice and Dignity Group, noting that women eat last so that their children and families eat better. Women forego all the good nutritious food in home. It means that women's health is very poor. Households are also taking on debt. That isn't a debt to Eskom, it is generally a debt to machinistas. And that debt is kind of being compounded every month. It's generally paid at very high interest rates. Eskom says there are three ways in which it's protecting the core. One, the poor. One is the subsidized costs.
Mr. Hallows, you seem to have encountered a technical problem. David, may you please just switch off your video camera? Maybe it's going to improve the transmission. Okay, I note the challenge that you have encountered. I don't know whether it's just on my side. Members of the panel, if you may just confirm that the problem is not sitting with me this side.
Chair, we can't hear him as well. Probably he may be hit by load shedding by now because there's one that started at 2. I'm also affected. Thanks.
Thank you.
Same here, Chair.
Oh, hey. Yeah, no, it's tough to sit in this situation, and then there's this spate of load shedding. All right, fine. I suggest that we proceed to get a presentation with. We'll come back and then ask questions if there are any to David Hallows. Meanwhile, let's proceed to Mr. David Naika. If David Naika is now in. If David Naika is still not in, we then proceed to Mr. Vusi Zweni, Ubunye Bama Hostela. Are you in, sir? Vusi Zweni. Ukhona mta. Ngibheka uVusi Zweni. Not umuzi Ntuli.
Uyena nisebenzisa i-laptop yakhe. Uvusi Zweni uku-laptop.
Ngoba kubuye kudide makubanjalo.
Okay, ngiyaxolisa.
Yeah. So qhubeka mntaka baba. Ngizoqhubeka ngesilungu ke. The following. Do you solemnly declare that the evidence you are going to give this panel is the truth and the whole truth?
Yes, I agree.
For the record, please state your name, organization, and your designation therein.
Nguvusani Alec Zweni. Ongusihlalo kwi-UBH ubunye bama-hostel eDurban.
Siyabonga Zweni. Hayi baba uZweni ke ungaqhubeka uye phambili usikunika lo 10 minutes ke uzama ukusidabukela mfethu ngoba akade lokhu besiqhutha ngesikhathi.
Ngiyabonga baba.
Danke mfethu.
Ngicela ukubonga kwipanel yonke ngothuba esinike lona. Okokuqala ngizozama ukuyisimplify. It may not be understood particularly ngabantu aba highly educated, but I will be talking directly to the impact to the people on the ground. As I representing the poor people, it is important to understand our side as a poor people. For the last 3 to 4 years, in South Africa, we're facing a COVID-19, which affects also the economy of the country. When people affected, I mean, the economy is affected, it also the job losses were there. Also, the part of that look goes on. After the COVID-19, there was a looting in KZN. That looting also affect heavily the business people and also the business to invest, particularly in that around, because it was a bad image in the country as a whole. That also affected the poor people at the end of the day. That alone affects the economy of the country. But after the looting, this year we were facing the floods, which destroy the lives of the poor people. People who are still in the hall, and there are some people who are not yet being buried. Why? Because the area they are sitting is not a good area for the people. It's for the poor people. While we are looking on that, Russia and Ukraine, their conflict affects us directly or indirectly. You can talk about petrol, you can talk all those things, but as a poor people, we'll talk about e.g. the gas, where we use because the electricity is too high. 19 LP gas, size 19, was costing about 350. But today, as I'm talking to you, it's 700 rand, double the price. You include many things, food and all those things is included now. So all those things, as a person from Eskom talking, he don't understand the impact on of the poor people. The reason maybe he never got hungry one day without food in their stomach. We are talking about the Eskom, who is breaking our appliances, our TVs, our electricities, because the load shedding have a heavy impact on that. So if you go to Durban, actually, where we stay particularly, you buy 100 rand, and then 100 rand to buy electricity. You get only 37.4 to buy electricity. You get only 37.4 units. Usually, we not use cook so much. We use gas because of the heavy price. I'm not talking about hot water. I'm talking about the need. So, a lot of people are unemployed. So, when people are unemployed, that means Eskom are pushing them to use izinyoka-nyoka. Which is not correct because it's going to affect rich and poor. As I'm talking to you, particularly in Durban, we're in stage 6. I was listening very carefully when they are talking. I was thinking that it shows that there's some person who's sleeping in the job. Load shedding is not affecting us as a poor people, also affecting the business. Even the international people, the question, is it conducive or is a correct decision to bring business in South Africa where there is no reliable electricity? So when there's a business in South Africa, he wants everything to you, and if you're not good, he went to the court. So these get maybe 4 or 5. All the companies, the agreement, which is reached by in any bargaining unit. Eskom is looking for 23%. The question is it affordable? The answer is no. When I spoke to you as a NASA, I said Eskom is a spoiled child. When I'm saying he's a spoiled child, he won't cry and say, we want us to give money, we give me money. no accountability. Tomorrow is coming and want another money. That's why I said, whether you can say today we are giving you 100 billion, will come and say I need another 100 billion. Thank you very much.
Asisibi osithathile ngakuwe. So siyabonga siyancoza mntakababa. I've heard the presentation from Mr. Zweni. Any questions from your side? Question from my side that you can just respond to, Babu Zweni. I'd just like to know, Uchi, in terms of the application itself, Uchi, banigweni laba base Eskom, you've got a specific recommendation concerning the application here. Please,
let me spell Zweni, Z-W-E-N-I. Firstly, as I said, losing the jobs, the status of the economy in South Africa at the moment, and put it all together and say, what is the accountability of the last? Well, we are in stage 6 now. So therefore, there is no need for them to give money unless we've got people who can run the entity professionally and successfully. Hello?
Siyabonga Babu Zweni. Link to Mr. Terence Ogle, unemployed movement of Osterville. Let's come forward, Mr. Ogle. Is Mr. Ogle in? Okay. In the absence of Mr. Ogle, may you please then proceed to Mr. Stephen Pillay from Havenside Civics.
I haven't seen him, Mr. Mkhize.
Absence of Mr. Pillay, and go to Mr. and switch your video camera on. I don't have Mr. Teddy Cavendish.
We can proceed to the next one, Mr. Mkhize.
Okay, I'll proceed then to Mr. JP Narayasamy from the KZN Fishers Forum.
Chair. Good afternoon,
Yes.
Chair. This is JP.
Okay, thanks, JP. Can you please just switch your video on just for the taking of the oath, then you can switch it off thereafter. Thank you, Mr. Narayasamy. Do you have any objections in taking the oath?
No, I do not.
Thank you. May you please then raise your hand and affirm the following. Do you solemnly declare that the evidence you are going to give to this panel is the truth and the whole truth?
I do.
Thank you. For the record, please state your name. Much for that. You may switch off your camera and then proceed with the presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, thank you for the opportunity to allow us to have this discussion with you. But I really need to put on record that we feel a bit disappointed because we would have appreciated if this session was held, if we had a physical session rather than a virtual session, because lots of people. Chair, can I go on? Chair,
May proceed?
Yeah, we're saying it would have been preferable if the app to go on virtual. But anyway, let me just start. Eskom energy costs are driven by diesel price increase and volume increase. This is because the diesel-fired plants intended for emergencies are now being used on a regular basis to operate in crisis mode. And they have already spent more than half of its annual diesel budget in 6 months. That's to the tune of 7 billion rands. This is while diesel is 5 times more the price of coal. Eskom is not proactive, and they have failed in their planning, hence do not have sufficient generating capacity to meet the demand due to their continuous breakdowns, and now relying on independent power producers. This is the typical example to the gap created by non-paying customers. So what is being done about all those illegal non-paying connections? We find that even our own municipalities, they are failing us in the sense that if you drive around, you'll see that the street lights are kept on 24 hours a day. These are all low-hanging fruits that add value, and yet again, the paying consumers are forced to pay for others' negligence. Mr. Andre de Ruyter, this past Sunday's media briefing, he acknowledged the challenges associated with the aging infrastructures, leading to unplanned breakdowns or maintenance. The question is, does Eskom have the relevant technical expertise, or should they, with some urgency, consult, even if it requires support from abroad? Common sense will say that you cannot do the same things and expect a different result. So why spend on something that is repetitively failing rather than upgrading to new technology, or better still, to move to cleaner, renewable energy, where economists are claiming that the price of electricity would be far more cheaper and affordable to all, and it will be a huge benefit to our climate. We can't suffer the consequences of poor substandard coal, the alleged vandalism, and other excuses to eradicate all those issues. Eskom is also trying to recover for part of the incorrectly deducted equity support for financial year 2020 to 2022 under the MYPD 4, as well as the regulatory account balance decision for financial year 2020, referring to prudent and efficient expenditure being recovered, which is 4 to 6 years later. Does this mean that we are now being asked to pay for Eskom's lost revenue as part of their recovery process? I'd like to find out what is the status of President Cyril Ramaphosa's announcement outlined in the National Energy Plan to split its generation and distribution business by the end of this year. That was to improve Eskom's operational and financial performance, to drive the economy, stimulate reindustrialization efforts, and to ensure electricity supply to houses. Government needs to fast track on creating employment. And in this way, more people will be paying taxes, contributing to their fiscus, rather than hurting the poor, vulnerable with the higher electricity tariffs. In yesterday's Daily News, there was an article about the Sundisi municipality in Pietermaritzburg, which is paying over 250 million rand to Eskom. And it goes on to say that our very own government departments are failing to pay their electricity users. A case in point is the South African Revenue Service, who was disconnected for owing 700,000 rand. How then do you expect unemployed citizens to pay if our own municipalities are not paying towards Eskom? We are currently paying exorbitant monthly electricity bills on estimates, based on estimates. Even during continuous load shedding, we are still paying the same high bill. Eskom needs to know that they have crippled this country with their poor service delivery, let alone the lack of international investments. What about our SMMEs who are forced to close? In closing, on behalf of the thousands of subsistence fisher folks, which many are unemployed and living below the poverty line, and people who are going to bed hungry, we humbly plead to NESA to put a stop to any more electricity price increases. We cannot allow Eskom to continue the way they are operating. With so much of load shedding and unreliable service delivery, who is going to be held accountable? Like the fishermen always say, the fish rots from the head. Therefore, from the consumer point of view, we want to see some changes within Eskom rather than them making the poor even poorer. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, sir. Excuse me. And we appreciate you keeping within the allocated time. Are there any questions, members of the panel, from your side? Okay, in the absence of any questions, I'll just would request you, Mr. Naria Dasemi, to maybe, but you can even just do it in writing to the National Energy Regulator, just to state how this will impact on the fishing industry or subsistence fishing as such, the increases on Eskom. Also would want to get that incorporated in the socio-economic impact analysis as much as possible. So if you can just assist in terms of if say, for example, if the increase applied for is granted as requested, what the impact is going to be. Such inputs kind of help us to deal directly with the application put forward.
We'll do so, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated, sir. Let's then proceed to Madam Verushka Medut, Market Users Committee. You just correct me in case I pronounce your surname wrongly. Please, madam. May you please come forward? In the absence of Verushka, I will then proceed to Mr. Betin Jakenthan from Right to Know. Mr. Betin, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Yeah, he
Burton
is
Jagannathan. Burton Jagannathan, that's correct, sir.
Okay. Burton Jagannathan, if you can just help just to switch your video camera on just for you to take the oath, and then you can then switch it off thereafter. Just for ease of data transmission during your presentation.
Greetings, sir.
Greetings. Sir, do you have any objections to taking the oath?
No objections.
Okay, thank you then. Please raise your hand and affirm the following then. Do you solemnly declare that the evidence you are going to give to this panel is the truth and the whole truth?
I do.
Thank you. For the record, please state your name, the organization you represent, as well as your designation therein.
My name is Burton Jagannathan, and I'm representing the organization Right to Know. I am the KwaZulu-Natal coordinator for Right to Know.
Thank you very much, sir. You've got your 10 minutes to put forth your presentation. Over to you,
Thank you, sir. So as Right to Know, we believe strongly that the economy of our country must support the working class in all its interests. And the economy should be supported by Eskom. But what we are finding that this is not the case. Eskom has failed in supporting the economy to an extent where we are progressing and we are flourishing. Instead, we find that because of Eskom's inefficiency and lack of providing stable electricity, businesses in South Africa, businesses owned by working class people, things like spaza shops, tuck shops, the corner shops, where they use minimal electricity. They do not use the amount of electricity that big multinational corporations use. They use minimal electricity. And when these electricity outages come about, these small businesses are affected. And as a result, the productivity is affected. There is very little profit made, if any. What we are asking for is stable electricity, consistent electricity, electricity which is of a good quality, electricity which is reliable to the extent that people can plan themselves. You know, they are able to organize their lives. Simple people, the go-go's, the grandfathers, the pensioners can organize their lives in the difficult lives that they lead in South Africa. They can organize their lives in a way where they are able to protect the food in their fridges. They're able to protect the old appliances they have, but which are still working. But when there are outages, we find that these appliances are damaged. They don't have the funds to go and purchase newer appliances. The food rots in the fridges because there's no refrigeration. There's nothing to keep it cold or to protect it. This is the basic problems that people of our country go through. Over the years, Chairperson, there have been many increases that Eskom has asked for and that they have been given those increases to the extent where they have been able to keep their business going in providing electricity to South Africa. Between 1988 and 2007, due to all these increases, the electricity tariffs increased by 223%. 223%. That was between 1988 and 2007. From 2007 to 2021, the electricity tariffs increased by 753%. 753%. So electricity is far more expensive now than it was in the past. That is a fact. There was a thinking by our government years ago that we were paying too little for electricity. It was too cheap. And I'm not sure whether that is also driving all these increases which are unaffordable. It is totally unaffordable. You have to be a millionaire in South Africa, at least, to be able to afford electricity of a very basic level. The issue of affordability in South Africa is a non-starter. I say this because affordability has decreased tremendously. The household income has shrunk, it has gone down, whereas the utility bill has gone up. On average, you're looking at 1,700 Rand just for electricity in a very basic household. And going up every year, even twice a year, these tariffs cannot be paid for by ordinary citizens. Eskom has outpriced itself. In other words, when you are running a business and you have stock on hand, you have to make it, you have to price it at a level where it's affordable to a consumer and to the general public, so that they can buy from that stock that you have. that you can buy from the stock of it. And when consumers buy from the stock, then you will make ends meet, you will make your profit, you'll be able to sustain your business. But if your prices are too high, no one's going to buy that product or the service that you're providing. No one's going to buy it. And as a result, your business is going to suffer. As a result, you will find that you cannot operate anymore because you have no income to sustain yourself. Eskom has outpriced itself by raising all these tariffs, by all the other factors that have been mentioned by my colleagues prior to me speaking, and it's got itself into a mess. And now we are being asked constantly to pay for this mess by paying these unaffordable increases. Eskom as a service provider has been totally inefficient. It doesn't make sense to us that we must constantly pay for these increases, and yet we're not even getting a stable service, an efficient service, even a decent service at the very basic level, a decent service. We're not even getting that. So how can we constantly pay for increases for services not provided? That is unjustifiable. As ordinary South Africans, we cannot be bullied into constantly paying for these increases. Therefore, we say there should be 0% increase. There should be no tariff increases. It doesn't warrant Eskom asking us for this unjustifiable increase. South Africans, as we understand, are prepared to pay for many services and goods in South Africa. They're prepared to pay, whether it's water, whether it's for fuel increases, whether it's for transport. South Africans are prepared to pay. But I think the time has come when South Africans must say, we cannot pay for a service that is almost non-existent, that is totally unpredictable, that disrupts our livelihoods to such an extent where people who are on oxygen machines, where poor people, where the pensioners, because of these outages and this load shedding, their lives become so unsafe and insecure. We cannot continuously be paying for the inefficiency of the management, for the mismanagement of funds, for the corruption that we see that's happening in Eskom. Therefore, we say, as a way forward in terms of finding solutions, as a way of trying to manage things, we say government must reduce the spending. Government must reduce their spending. How do we do this? We have to take drastic steps. You cut ministers' salaries. National ministers, all the ministers across the provinces, cut their salaries. That's how we will have funds to give to Eskom. There should be no bonuses for any of the Eskom employees, no bonuses. You cannot reward inefficiency, instability. You cannot do that. Why give employees bonuses in Eskom when we are running such an inefficient organization? There should be no spokespersons for all these national ministers. It's time we did away with all these fancy frills. Let the ministers speak for themselves. We will be saving funds. Those same salaries for spokespersons can be pumped into Eskom. There should be no deputy ministers. We don't need deputy ministers at the national level. Our ministers should do the work for themselves. That's what we are saying. And therefore, finally, I wanted to say in terms of the estimation principle where you have electricity at a municipal level, you get meter readings being done and they estimate how much a household used, a 3-month estimation period. Now this 3-month estimation period has become very, very problematic. People who are living alone in a house have been billed hundreds of thousands of rands for a month. which is totally ridiculous and it doesn't make sense. So in terms of estimating the electricity that a person is using in a household or family is using, we feel that that should be done away with because it's totally inaccurate. Electricity people are using and the bills that they're receiving on a monthly basis doesn't match up. It doesn't match up at all. We believe that we should revert and go back to the user pay principle. We've had this before. It was successful. People could recognize their bills because the bills were matching what they were using per month in terms of kilowatts usage. So we're saying the user pay principle is you pay for only the electricity that you have physically used, not an estimation, not a guessing what electricity has been used by a family and a household. We say they need to go back to the user pay principle and we need more efficient systems so that our people can want to pay for electricity, but we want to pay the correct amount for correct usage. On that point, Chairperson, I'd like to stop. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the presentation, sir. Just on time. Panel members, do you have any questions? Madam Sibia?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the presenter. I think Mr. Burton. Just one issue that he has raised, the issue of increases from the 90s up until, taking into account the fact that in the early 90s or the early 2000s, when we were talking about the cheaper energy, it's because there was old plant, which was from decades ago, which was 40 years ago. But then when you come now to the 2000s, then you include the new plant. And then also there's a change in energy mix, which was previously only coal and a small component of hydro. And then now the energy mix, like we've seen earlier, it's got now OCGTs having a larger share also in it. So also include that when you do your pricing analysis, because it's also have an impact on the increases because it's part of the costing. The new plant, the change in energy mix from the previous one to now. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any comment, Mr. Jagannathan, in this regard?
No, Chairperson, I don't have any comment on that matter. Just other than to say that, yes, there could have been those changes that have taken place, but still we say there is no need for such massive increases in tariffs. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. This then concludes the presentation from Mr. Jagannathan. I will then proceed to Madam Alice Thompson of EarthLife Africa, Durban. Do I have Madam Alice Thompson?
It doesn't seem to appear on the platform, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Just once again, to make sure that I don't leave anyone out here unduly so, there's Mr. David Naika, has not come back. Mr. Terence Og, Mr. Devan Pillay, Mr. Teddy Cavender, Madam Verushka Medut. If they're not in, I'll then have to proceed then to get Eskom to respond, and then we may close.
Chairperson.
Yes, Advocate Tole.
I see Mr. David Paulos is back in the meeting. I don't know if you want him to wrap up or remember he was cut off while he was presenting, Chairperson. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Hallows, your time was fully expended, but I will give you maybe just not more than 3 minutes just to wrap up in terms of your presentation, and then we can then get questions posed to you if there are any. Over to you, Mr. David Hallows.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Can hear you loud and clear, sir.
Great, thank you. I'll just quickly conclude then. Just say Eskom's debt is still the biggest threat to the country's economy, and government has been muddling through with equity injections without a real plan. We are now told that there will be a plan coming out of Treasury. We'll see if there's actually a plan that seriously addresses that issue. There's been a lot made about cost-reflective pricing. Cost-reflective pricing is not going to fix what's wrong.
Maybe you can just switch off your camera just to make it easy for data flow. And continue, please.
Beg your pardon, just let me find that. Yeah, is that better now?
Yeah, it's better. Continue, sir.
Great. Cost-reflective pricing isn't going to fix the mismatch between what people can pay and what Eskom says that it needs to run its system. If we move, people can't pay what Eskom is asking for now, and Eskom says that it is not yet cost-reflective pricing. So those two sides of the system simply do not meet at the moment. NERSA has been left to square the circle, but the regulatory system is also broken. We note that Eskom has lost successive court cases. Basically, the entire system is in need of being addressed, not merely trying to make this system as it is work again. Poverty is the product of 100 years of development. Poor people cannot bear the cost of government failure or of cost-reflective pricing. And finally, climate and local environmental crises must be addressed with absolute urgency. I have sent you the set of slides that I've been reading off, and perhaps you would like to address yourselves to that. But basically, in the original application, Eskom's what they said would be emitted by mid-century or by not mid-century, by mid-decade or by the end of the decade, implies emissions nationally which are far higher than are compatible with either 1.5 degrees or with 2 degrees, or indeed with the latest nationally determined contribution. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hallows, for being able to come back and wrap up. We appreciate that. Members of the panel, do you have any questions? Starting off with Mr. Pugula. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Chairperson. Mr. Hallows, there's something you mentioned about primary energy being, I'm not sure if you said next to the IPP cost or that it mustn't be placed in the place where there are primary energy costs. May you just explain that, because I'm not sure if it was just the fact that I don't have your slides and therefore I couldn't hear you properly, but may you please just help me with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pugula. Advocate Stole, over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thanks to Mr. Hallows. In his verbal presentation, if I heard him correctly, he said that Eskom alleges the protection of the poor in its application. And what I want to find out from him, is there anything wrong in attempts to protect the poor in terms of this particular application? Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Advocate Chole. Maybe one from my side, Mr. Hallows. I heard you in your last comments stating that the regulatory system is broken without necessarily coming in and having a lot of discussions on this platform. I'll appreciate that if you can put forth your comments and maybe possible remedies to the energy regulator, just to send your inputs in writing as other parties to this public hearing are also going to do. That would be highly appreciated, because we seek to be on a continuous improvement path, and therefore any comment that seeks to make us and make the whole system actually more effective and efficient is highly appreciated. You may respond then, Mr. Hallows.
Thank you. Can you still hear me?
Yes, may continue, sir.
Okay, great. Right, in terms of Mr. Bakula's question, there are, in the presentation of the application, both in the original application and in the addendum, IPPs and imported energy are, when they are bought by Eskom, they are bought as power. Primary energy is bought as coal, which still has to be turned into power, and there's kind of a way in which the cost of the coal gets compared with the cost of power that's ready to be sent out. In the addendum, when they talk about when they show on tables 4 and 5, I think it is, how the cost between the new Eskom divisions will be allocated, they still have the IPP costs and the imported electricity costs under the generation division.
Environment. So we've written some stuff, but I don't know if you want to say it.
Hello.
Yeah. To say
hello, there's some interference
today.
On the line. It would be my understanding that the logic of the putting Eskom into different divisions is that transmission buys the power from everybody, including Eskom generation. So the question really is, why are those costs allocated as they are, rather than showing up under the cost to the transmission system on table 5, so that the costs of IPPs and the costs of buying power from Eskom generation are not shown, yeah, because that would be the true comparison, yeah. And I just want to emphasize that this doesn't mean that we actually support the model of privatizing renewables that government has put in place. The issue of the protection or lack of protection of poor people, there are three mechanisms that Eskom claims are there to protect the poor, and this goes back to their original application. Yeah, the first is the subsidized cost of connection. Just to recall the history there, following apartheid, most black people in this country were not connected to the grid or not connected to electricity. Connecting people was a minimal form of equity. Charging people for the connection now, after that history of inequity, is iniquitous, in my view. The need for people to be connected to electricity is clear. It relieves women of the burden of finding fuel. It eliminates indoor air pollution. It reduces household fires, particularly in shack settlements, and it eliminates informal connections. It would seem to us that it is absolutely essential that people should be connected to the grid, and that the cost of doing so should be supported in a different way. You can't put that cost to the people, nor can you really count it as a subsidized cost. It is a cost of redressing an historical wrong, and indeed an ongoing wrong. The second way is through free basic electricity. First of all, 50 kilowatt hours a month is not enough. People need at least 200 kilowatt hours to have a reasonable energy supply, and even that's a little bit crimped. It is the system works on a mean and derogatory means testing for indigence. Indigence is a word from Victorian England, which is generally insulting to poor people, in my view. And then it's left to the municipalities. Funding from Treasury is for 2 municipalities is for about 10 million households. Only 2 million households actually get it. So there's something like a 6 billion ripoff of the poorest households. And part of the reason for that, of course, is that the municipalities themselves are irrevocably in debt, not only to Eskom. So national government really needs to sort that kind of issue out. The last means that Eskom identifies of addressing poverty is through the inclining block tariff. But Eskom want to remove the inclining block tariff, and rather, they say it doesn't work because people don't understand it. Nobody's actually really gone out of their way to explain how it works to people so that they do understand it. We think that there should be a universal inclining block tariff, starting with the first block of 200 kilowatt hours free. That would do away with free basic electricity and the interception of that money by municipalities. And after that, you could start doing a second block of, say, 201 to 400 kilowatt hours at a modest rate, with increasingly steep increases after that for the following block, so that it works very much in the same way as progressive taxation. The logic at the moment, particularly from cost recovery, from cost calculated tariffs, is that the more you use, the cheaper it gets. We think that that's an inverted logic. It should be the more you use, the more you pay. So that is basically my response on the issue of poverty. And then I think, Mr. Mkhize, you wanted me to address your question in writing rather than here. But just to quickly say that in terms of what's been going on, a lot of people are raising issues which go beyond nurses' remit, and which are either addressed at Eskom's door or at government's door. And it would seem to us that that this is part of a kind of systems failure of government and of the regulatory system as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hollis. I would actually prefer that you send in writing, particularly because, you know, when it comes to these things, it's easy to come up with sometimes with an argument when the counter argument there too is not fully and properly considered. So sometimes when one is doing the write up, it becomes better because one can also think about counter arguments and kind of have a first run test of the argument one is seeking to put forth. So please do put that forward. We also interact with other authorities as well as government in terms of our act, and that would then come in handy.
Sure.
Chairperson, we can't hear you. I don't know whether it's me.
I think it's probably on mute, ma'am.
Can you still hear me now?
Yes,
can
we
you
can,
hear me?
sir. Yes,
Yes,
sir.
we can
Yeah,
hear
yeah,
you.
I had a bit of a blip on my connection, this side of NERSA. Mr. Dlamini, just to confirm that none of the people that could not be present are available, so that we can then call Eskom to come forward and provide responses.
I wanted to ask Mr. Mkhize if maybe you could call the names again of the people who couldn't make it, because there is one or two new names that I'm not familiar with.
I've got Mr. David Naika, Mr. Terence Og, Mr. Devon Pillay, Mr. Teddy Cavender, Madam Verushka Medut, and Madam Alice Thompson. There are none of those, then...
That doesn't look like it, sir.
Thank you. If there are none of those, then that gives me then the right to then proceed and request Eskom to respond. Eskom, I also hope that you have noted that the key issues are actually around the issue of affordability, and then there are some around information sharing, and to a great extent the issue of load shedding juxtaposed with the request for increases in tariffs, which don't seem to go down well, as well as around the issue of the plant utilization and efficient management, as well as matters that pertain to corruption and malfeasance have been coming up again and again in terms of improved management of the utility. That would assist, even if not going to details right now, but I think like you have done, for example, in the past, where you indicate what kind of progress have been made with regard to dealing with corruption, improving in terms of the management of the utility, over and above just demonstrating the need from your side of the requested increase. Please then, Mr. Kasim and the team, you may come forward and respond.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, from my side and the team side, we note all the inputs from the various stakeholders. We'll obviously, as you summarize, deal with that in our closing tomorrow, and that's our understanding. Or if the hearings extend to another day. We will then close on that. But just quickly, from my side, I think the issue of corruption, as I've indicated yesterday, that's a key priority from a board and a management perspective. We're working with all the law enforcement agencies and also through the net joints. There's a separate work stream to support not only Eskom but other SOEs. We've even had a first roundtable in that session a few weeks ago with the key SOEs and government to address security issues. In terms of performance, Chair, we presented that today, and as I said, we are committed and working around the clock to deal with the load shedding. I know over the next 2 days, the group chief executive, the COO, and head of generation, they are visiting a number of power stations over the next 2 days to assess the situation and also to encourage staff to keep focus on addressing the performance to reduce the load shedding to the country. Chair, if you allow us, tomorrow we will prepare the key themes. My team has been taking the necessary comments and notes. I unfortunately had to deal with some other key meetings that I couldn't get out of. So that's why I had to switch off for a few hours. But we will then close with all the key themes that were raised over these past 2 days. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kassim. I will then just a few comments on my side before we close. I also would like to really thank the NERSA team as well as the members of the panel. As I have already indicated in the beginning, that we are actually still in an organization in mourning, and but I thank them for the efforts that they put in. We are functioning in this online mode with this. I must at the same time echo my, and I won't call it a displeasure, but it's a kind of disappointment. I was born in KZN, maybe to be very clear on that. And I know that even in the past it used to be KwaZulu and Natal, and no wonder now it's KwaZulu Natal afterwards. But I don't see the KwaZulu part featuring. If you cross together, I don't see people featuring there, and I was hoping that they would feature in the sense that now they don't necessarily have to travel to maybe a facility in Durban, or maybe go to the ICC, and therefore to buy an equivalent of data for that, and maybe even club as a group and be in one venue would actually be more financially sound. So it's just that's something that we need to also look at from our side in terms of improving participation, as well as also in terms of the diversity of participation. For me, it's a kind of it doesn't go down well, and I think that it is important that I echo my disquiet around about that. And then the issues of affordability, they come up, as well as information sharing. I would also like us to appreciate the fact that we as South Africa, we're facing a triple scourge of unemployment, poverty, and inequality. And unfortunately, we seem to deny the fact that South Africa is plagued by inequality, which is further exacerbated by bigotry. Hence, we need a differentiated engagement tactic that we are able to then talk to somehow. I hope the team made up of Vuyelwa and Amanda and them from our side will engage also with Eskom and the municipalities as they do, just to up the ante there, and engage with them, especially outside of these presentations or these engagements, to get even the lay people to understand maybe the how the pricing is or the tariff is set, what are the key issues, and be able to assist in terms of also getting inputs that will assist to talk directly also to the presentation itself for or the application itself in the main. I think that would assist. Also, the issue of being able to communicate in a manner that is understood without a lot of jargon. I know it's not easy, noting the kind of industry that we're in, but it's something that I believe we need to really work very hard on. And I still invite Eskom as well as other licensees and registrants in this sector to continuously engage with our technical team. There be understanding of these matters. For example, if you're talking of an EAF of 59% from your side, Eskom, then the fact is that maybe there is a plant that you're talking of it as sitting in 46 or 45%, because that is an average EAF. And then the question is, that kind of a plant that cannot be up and running half of the time, is it really fair that it be included in the RAP? So these are some of the things that when there's engagement at a technical level, some of them, they come here having been dealt with and sorted out. We as a regulator, I still repeat, we don't have the monopoly of wisdom, and we require all of us to work together to make sure that whatever we do assist in terms of the energy being an input into our economy. Hence, from my side, I would still like to again echo my gratitude to everyone that has attended this session, especially those who have also taken time to prepare presentations and come here and prepare. Not also leaving out Eskom in terms of you responding to our questions as well as our request. It doesn't mean that we should always agree on this thing. It doesn't mean that it will always be to our satisfaction, but the mere fact that you taking effort in doing that is highly appreciated. Let us work together then going forward and provide inputs outside of this platform, like I requested from your side, Mr. Hallows, as well as others. Please do provide then written inputs within the 14 days. It would be appreciated if you can do it even much earlier than that, being the 7 days. But we'll give until the 14th day for you to then provide inputs via written comments. So from my side to the NERSA team, everyone that has worked, to the Secretariat that has worked to ensure that this session is a success, thank you very much. We'll have another session tomorrow starting at 9 o'clock. I hope I'm right, Mr. Dlamini. I hope, Mr. Dlamini, I'm right. At 9 o'clock, we'll have the session.
Yes, Mr. Mkhize, tomorrow we will be bright and early at 9, sir.
Thank you very much for that. And thanks for all the hard work that you do in the background. Thanks to my fellow board members as well as panelists in this session. So this public hearing